it going, Dan?
Hi, me. I read the first two.
I don't think so. I just logged on. So.
Oh no, we got a lot of others. Okay, great.
Okay, good evening, everybody.
Evening. Hi.
Good evening. Jaime, do we have the applicant with us?
We have John Fry, so maybe. John Fry is representing the applicant.
Okay, I think so. So why don't we get started?
Want to bring them over?
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is the March meeting of the Village of Ossining's Historic Preservation Commission. It's about 7:02 in the evening on Monday, March 7th. I'm Adam Markovics, chairperson of the HPC. Could the others present today state their name for the record?
Dan Garpowit.
Joyce Cole.
Catherine Wilson.
Mary Kay Greiner.
Martinez, Planning Director, staff of the board.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to go out of order in the agenda when we have an applicant with us. So I'd like to move straight to the application. I believe a representative for the applicant is here with us this evening. If the applicant's representative could introduce yourself for the record, I'd appreciate it. And if you could tell us a little bit about what the application is all about.
Thank you. I'm John Fry, principal at Nexus Creative Architecture and Planning in Tarrytown, New York. Jaime, I may be joined by the actual applicant, Amy Hall at Hudson Valley Books for Humanity bookstore, and Kezia Garvey from our office, but I'm not sure they're logged on yet. If not, it's not. I can continue here. Good evening, everyone. There's Kezia. As you all may be aware, or perhaps not aware, Hudson Valley Books for Humanity has been operating in the first floor corner space since just before Thanksgiving of 2021. And they've been incrementally really ramping up the interior of the space. There were minor elements on the exterior, which included a more appropriate glass door that I assume was a part of a previous review and approval process when the building was repaired and restored to a certain extent after the fire. That door has not arrived yet. And so tonight, we're here to share some signing and sidewalk activation ideas, but more specifically the signage, because that's frankly a next step for them and a critical move as they begin to energize and use the space more robustly. So there are three elements we'd like to share tonight. There's the vertical panel, bracket hung panel. In this image, in the upper right-hand portion of the image, there is a clear acrylic graphic that's above the door transom. That's on the, perfect, thank you. Is that you, Jaime? That's above the door transom. And then there are at the street level, the notion of murals. And in full transparency, these murals originally, the original idea was real bookshelves that were seasonally placed on the sidewalk, perhaps with some other bench elements over time. And then Amy Hall actually had the idea of, well, you know, in terms of logistics and practicality, perhaps that wasn't a realistic grounded notion, but what if we transcribe that idea as murals on these brick panel bases, which in our view are really kind of peculiar to the building, to the real historical nature of the building. They're not low enough to really represent what would typically be the vocabulary of a transparent space in a building of this vintage. They're painted brick already. And so we felt like that was another opportunity that wasn't so much signage based. It was sidewalk energizing and graphic based.
Mr. Fry, if I could just interrupt for a second though.
Sure.
You're just laying the groundwork now for this idea of a mural at some point in the future. The murals are not part of the application that's before us tonight, right?
I think yes, that is the characterization. Frankly, we're not sure what the mechanisms for those may or may not be. And guidance tonight, I think, is one of the takeaways we'd like to have dialogue about. But yeah, in a summary, it's really the vertical sign and the graphic panel above the transom. So there are, Jaime, is Kezia able to share, because or unless you have it queued up, there are more specific graphics for the vertical element.
She can share.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Give me a moment, please. Oh, sorry, wrong one. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're going to come to this one anyway.
Hold on. Let me just bring up the most current one.
I think the photographs might have been beneficial too for sharing, Kezia. Okay, so does everybody see the image? It's a drawing A1 that has a photograph in the lower right-hand corner.
Yeah.
So the you can see the scale of the vertical panel at the corner, and the corner of this building has a beveled corner. If you notice in the masonry, the brackets would be attached to the beveled corner, and the banner would be facing the intersection as you see it here. And then on the Central Avenue side above the door transom, you can see, I mean, that's not going to be so evident from this five corners intersection view. It's more of a sidewalk level, simple graphic, which originally the original idea was to actually paint the brick. I mean, there was a historic precedent for bookstores and painting similar graphics on the brick, but the building owners were hesitant. And so the idea of the clear acrylic as a similar notion with a simple black graphic standing in front of the brick is our proposal. And on the left, you can see the actual panel and the colors. The colors reflect Hudson Valley Books for Humanity's color palette on their website, primarily a blue background with a simple vertical text. This text reflects a serifed text typeface. Quite frankly, we all stepped back, wondering if a more simplified sans-serif typeface might be a more appropriate. There is a in the example on the lower right, you can see that's a sans-serif text. That's a typeface, which is a little simpler. And then the upper portion of the bracket would have a very simple, very low intensity light fixture.
Okay. And Mr. Fry, let me just say that I appreciate the completeness of the application that was submitted, including historic photographs of the property, the Olive Opera House. And I appreciate your presentation here tonight. I know it can be a bit awkward, given that we're all on video screens.
We've all grown to accustomed to this methodology, I think. Thank you.
You know, typically with signs, the main concern that we have is how do things get attached, and what kind of injury, if any, will be done to historic brick by way of the attachments. So I wonder if you could speak to the manner of attachment of both the banner and the acrylic plaque, and perhaps describe the condition of the bricks that the applicant is, planning to install these brackets into.
Yes, well, and certainly from the architectural perspective, similar concerns. We've spoken with the sign vendor, similar concerns. So that you can, the example we're sharing on the lower right-hand corner, it shows 2 fasteners per gusset. And so each attachment to the building would have 2 fasteners. They would tend to be small diameter, but very deep. And they would have an expansion mechanism as opposed to a larger diameter grouted in fastener. The brick, albeit vintage, is stable, and we wouldn't rely on a shallow depth anchor in the outer withe of the brick because it would be suspect. So, and drilling technology today is not what it was, has advanced from what it was 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So the precision and the damage incurred from drilling today and using a mechanical anchor is much less than it has been in the past. But that all said, there will be holes. and they're unavoidable. The acrylic panel obviously is a much smaller item. Those holes, if you could zoom in, Kezia, like to the upper right hand, because I feel like those are the most delicate. I mean, that's the diameter of the gusset on the acrylic sheet. The fastener that's attached to is a much smaller diameter. I'm guessing it's 3/8 of an inch, if it's that much. So there would be 4 3/8 inch holes for the acrylic panel. But if you go and walk the sidewalk, especially on Central Avenue now, and I'm not suggesting this is any reason to embrace making 4 more holes, but there are a legacy of past signage holes along the upper course of the windows along Central Avenue, all of which can be repaired to some degree and masked. So I don't know if that answers or your question or provides some level of relief or concerns.
So that covers the plaque. How about the banner?
So you see, back to the 2 anchors, yeah, thank you, Kezia, right? Yeah, those are larger diameter. Those are probably 1/2 inch to 5/8 inch, and they're probably going to be at least 5 inches to 7 inches deep. But the plan is 2 fasteners per bracket, per gusset.
Okay, well, thank you. So again, historically, that has been our concern when we think about signs, is about the mechanism by which signs are fastened. There is going to be some damage to the historic brick. The question is whether that's an issue that we can overlook. As for the other aspects of the application, I don't have any issues whatsoever with the materials, the colors, the font. None of that presents an issue for me. So I'm curious to hear the group's feedback about attaching these new signs to 2 different facades of the building. Mr. Fry has been candid. Holes will be created where there are not now holes. And I'm curious about the group's thoughts about that and about the other aspects of the application.
May I ask a question?
Please.
Oh, hi, Mr. Fry, thanks. It looks like a wonderful presentation. I just had questions. I don't know if they're really concerns, but it's the image on the top, the small black and white image in the Books for Humanity. That looks like it's black painted aluminum. What is that material? Is that anodized or?
I mean,
it's
the
not
example
the stainless steel rod that I see under carry. That's not what you're proposing. It's this black frame.
Yes, it's the frame will be in black. The actual the color of the frame will be black. The actual gussets, when I say gussets, where the frame attaches to the building, are likely going to be round, like you see here.
Oh, okay. And is the banner a canvas or an acrylic fabric, or is it rigid? I'm not really sure. Just curious, what is the banner made out of? Is it
The
an
banner, acrylic fabric, a high density acrylic fabric.
So it won't have a sheen, it'll be matte?
It won't have a sheen. It'll be a flat finish. And in full transparency, and as this evolved, when we were originally discussing a rigid panel that's much heavier and required much more robust bracketing, that's when, and many more fasteners, that's how this evolved to what about a much lighter panel material, thus reducing the bracket requirements and the anchor requirements. And that was the full evolution of the thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. So the bracket, I forgot, that's an aluminum. Those are aluminum channels, top and bottom, that they're anodized, yes, or they're painted, or what are they?
Yes, they'll be anodized.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, hi, I have a question. I noticed some of the examples that you provided were mostly, in my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, were for inside brackets. Is there anything that's different that because you're going to be putting this on the outside of a building? Yes, and I'm glad you asked. So the practical concern for the acrylic panel is cleaning, keeping it clean. And obviously the surface side is not challenging. It's the backside between the brick that's challenging. So the standoffs, if you will, the distance between the back of the panel and the face of the brick as compared to these images, which are indeed interior images, will be greater so that someone can clean the backside of the acrylic panel. I think these images all represent, I think the top and bottom acrylic image probably represent the same distance from the brick backing, which is maybe 1.5 inches. The 54 Highfield Road example is probably much closer. We're working with the sign vendor. There's no science to apply, but we're guessing 3.5 inches from the back of the acrylic to the brick, so it can be cleaned. Mm-hmm. And what about the Books for Humanity sign? If that eventually wears or tears, how would that be replaced? Would you have to take the brackets down and put it back up? It's the beauty of that material to a certain degree. It's much more accommodating to be replaced over time as opposed to a sign panel or a rigid panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Kay and Dan, for those questions. They were helpful to me. I wonder if we could take a look at the exterior of the building. I think there were some close-ups included in the application. So we have those in front of us.
Oh, just give me a moment. I'll bring it up right now.
And in the meantime, Catherine, Joyce, any thoughts?
I am very okay with it because this building is the treasure of the downtown, and I'm happy to see a bookstore in it. So I think it won't affect the significance of the building, and it seems like it'll be very low impact, attachment to the building. So I do not have a problem with it.
I agree, Adam. The only question I had you asked was
how invasive that bracket being attached was going to be, and you asked that question early on. So I had my answer.
Okay. I think something that would be useful to add into the language of any certificate of appropriateness that's issued is just some clarification about the colors that are being used, because it's not entirely apparent from the application, at least as I saw it, like with regard to the plaque, for example. I don't think the application spells out anywhere that it will be in black typeface, or the graphic will be in black.
Sure, we can do that.
And I don't think, Mr. Fry, I don't think you need to resubmit anything. I think we can do that on our end, you know, in drafting your certificate of appropriateness, you know, assuming we get the thumbs up tonight. The colors of the banner are, however, I think apparent in the application itself. Dan Garbowood asked about the color of the, forgive me, I don't know the terminology, but it's the brackets that hold the banner, and the color of that wasn't apparent either from the application. That Mr. Fry has said is going to be black brackets.
Correct.
As you described, stainless steel gussets.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry. The actual fasteners are stainless steel. The gusset is likely going to be aluminum also.
Okay, so not black.
No, black. I mean, you're going to see as opposed to that image that was clear anodized aluminum and a silver color, if you will.
Okay.
The round medallion is going to be black, and the fasteners are actually stainless steel.
Okay. You also expressed that there was some tentativeness on the part of the applicant about whether to go with the serif font on the banner or scrap the serif and make it sans-serif. Do you have a decision there about that tonight, or this is just something that is in the air? That's been a subject of conversation. I mean, is this final? Is it a serif font that you plan to use? I mean, I just want to deal with this in the certificate of appropriateness, so there's just complete consistency between what's done and what's in the COA.
And thank you. We appreciate that. We're sans-serif.
Okay. All right. So with those clarifying points in place, namely that the typeface and graphic on the acrylic plaque will be black, that the gusset and bracket that's going to affix the banner will likewise be black, that the font on the banner will be sans-serif, but that the color will otherwise be, and graphic will otherwise be as represented in the application. I move to approve the application and issue a certificate of appropriateness for the two signs proposed by the applicant. Would anyone second that motion?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Terrific. Mr. Fry is still there somewhere?
I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hope this was relatively painless. Again, we appreciate the completeness and thoroughness of the application and your presentation tonight. And personally, I just want to wish your clients the very best of luck with this enterprise. I personally am really rooting for them, and it's a wonderful addition to our downtown.
I will certainly pass that on, and we're happy to be working with this particular client in such a noble effort. If you haven't been in, please go visit the store, and it's going to continue to improve as springtime arrives.
Yeah, I've been there a few times, and it's very unique.
So one last question. The notion of murals on the painted ochre color panels, is that how would we pursue that with this board? What form would that application take?
So, Mr. Fry, if I understand you, and it's a little hard to tell from the picture.
Can you zoom in, Kezia, to that area?
Okay. These, so what are those? They are wood panels?
Brick.
Or it's brick?
It's painted brick, heavily painted brick.
Okay.
That's wanting of something, in our humble opinion.
May I ask, is this like a Trump Loy mural? I mean, is that what you're trying to do, or?
I mean, the notion it's a mural. It's not going to have this projected depth and dynamic to it. It's just kind of a happy little notion of bookshelves and books, and perhaps another graphic that we've shared on that image, on that proposed image.
Yeah,
it's whimsical and anecdotal.
It seems to me there would likely need, I defer to Corporation Counsel on this. It seems to me there'd likely need to be a separate application for that, but it strikes me as a fairly non-controversial application. We've got heavily painted brick. They're the only sections of the facade that are painted. And it would seem to me that anything painted on these yellow panels could be easily reversed and returned to the existing yellow.
Happy color.
But I defer to Corporation Counsel about whether a second application would need to be submitted to the HPC for the murals.
There is a pending application now which includes the murals. So if the applicant wants to come back at a future date with regard to the murals, it can simply be continued through this one application. The COA now will just deal with the two signs, but the application includes the murals as well. So that they don't have to file for a new one. They can essentially continue on the one that they're under.
That's great. Okay,
Perfect.
Very good.
All righty. That works for us. I feel like that's linear and streamlined.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Fry.
All righty. Thank you.
Corporation Counsel will draft a certificate of appropriateness. He'll get it over to me by email. Throughout the pandemic, I've been electronically signing these COAs, and that'll be returned to you by the planning department as soon as possible.
Terrific. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Phil Veranda's joined us. Good evening, Phil.
Sorry, I'm late. Technical problems.
No problem. Okay. And also I just received, I received an email from Stephen Casey about 20 minutes ago saying that he's on the call but needs to be promoted.
Yeah, I think
there
I just got promoted. I don't know if I'm signing on to these meetings right, or if there's another link or something I should be using. Does one get promoted at the start of all these meetings, or is there a...
So you need to be signed into Zoom under whatever the login is for your email account. So are you signing in that way?
I'm not sure. I do sign in, to something very strange. Maybe we can take this offline.
You just have to sign in with your village account.
All right.
That's the one that's registered to the analyst ID. If not, we can just promote you.
All right. And how does one get into Zoom then when I sign into through my village account?
You have to set up an account, essentially. Go there, go to Zoom, set up an account, use your village ID, your village email as the user ID, and then create your own password. Then you have the account. Then automatically when you come in, you sign in under your village ID, your village email, and you'll be automatically promoted.
I see. Okay. All right. I didn't know that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And Stephen, if you have any follow-up on that, let me know. That seems like a lot of steps that I'm not getting involved in personally. I just click on a link that says join. So let me know. Turning now to something that's not on the agenda, I had heard from someone in the village who was concerned about the Smith Robinson house, and rightly so. And we had received an update from the developer and Corporation Counsel a few months ago. I thought it'd be a good opportunity to check back in on the status of the Smith Robinson house and any legal proceedings that may be pending. I don't know. So I asked Stuart to brief us on that, and I'm now inviting Stuart to do so.
I'll give you a very brief update as to where we are. The developer was issued a renewed building permit 12 days ago. That permit includes multiple provisions, including that within 45 days from the date of that permit, so by April 9th, they must submit a building permit application to do the work that was necessary, that is to be done at Smith Robinson House, because the pending building permit only is for the construction of the 3 new buildings and the underground parking structure. We've also asked the owner to permit a further inspection of Smith Robinson House, because I suspect, although I don't have it proven, but I suspect that the work that was done back in 2016, 2017, with regard to the asbestos abatement did not include the demolition work that was to be done inside Smith Robinson House in accord with the demolition plans. It seems from everything that was not done. So we want to get the building inspector in there. We have brought to the attention of the building owner that that the building is still open to the elements. Building owner had indicated he needed to get some additional equipment on site to do that. That was about 10 days ago. It does not appear that equipment has been done there. So the building owner will be cited for that continuing violation. I don't know what more to tell you, because we did a lot to get them a renewed building permit, and then it sort of from their end stopped. But this current permit does require certain things to be done within 30 days of the issuance of the permit, within 45 days. And if those things are not done, then the pending permit essentially lapses, or is revoked, not lapse. And then they would have to start all over. As directly relates to HPC, in accord with the previously issued certificate of appropriateness, The developer is to provide HPC with updated plans with regard to the work to be done at Smith Robinson. We are awaiting those plans. That's essentially where we are right now. Most recent thing I can tell you. It is on tomorrow night's zoning board agenda, but frankly, there's nothing to be decided by the zoning board because the issue before the zoning board was to see if the building inspector was wrong in revoking the permit. Since the permit has been renewed, essentially the application before the zoning board, at least in my opinion, is rendered moot. And as to Smith Robinson, we have made it very clear to the attorney that that they must pull a permit with regard to Smith Robinson. The last thing we want is to have them start the work on everything else and not work on Smith Robinson. To be blunt, I have no idea if they actually intend to do the work or not. But we've given them enough rope. If they decide to hang themselves, so be it.
Have they been fined at this point for past violations?
That's up to the court. The court has thus far not fined them.
They were in court on this 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
That's correct. The matter has been adjourned with regard to some of the matters that we've been dealing with the permit, but that is correct. And the court is, and it is still before the court.
Okay. The concern, I think, from the member of the public who I spoke to, and it's our concern, is another historic building in the village of Ossining rotting in plain sight, and a developer not facing any consequences.
Adam, we're doing the best we can. I understand what you're saying, but you know what? We're literally doing the best we can. We have been in court. We've been dealing with the permit. Jaime is aware of this. I am on the phone with this guy almost every single day. We are in the middle of litigation. They brought an Article 78 against the village to compel them to do certain things. I wish I could wave a magic wand to get it done. We're working as hard as we can.
Yeah, I want to second what Stuart's saying. I think from the general public, people will come out and say, well, hey, why aren't you doing anything? The public has rights. People have rights. There's due process rights. There's a lot. So there's only so much you can do and only at a certain pace, right? So they, have had everything examined up to this point. They have a lot of conditions that they need to adhere to in order to move forward with their permit. But, it's not a criminal action. So there's no cops that are going to come and put cuffs on somebody for allowing the building to continue to deteriorate. They are at risk of losing millions of dollars that they've already sunk into these projects. So the cost of them is going to be pretty steep to the average person who wants to make sure that the building doesn't get damaged. That may not mean much, but literally that's all we can do. They now are at risk of losing millions of dollars. So that's pretty significant to them, I'm sure. And, we would hope that it would be enough to get them moving. Unfortunately, it hasn't.
May I ask a question about the issue again? Is it the issue that they're just not moving on putting a roof in, and because it's very expensive and we want it to be watertight? Is that essentially the failure we're talking about on their behalf?
With regard to Smith Robinson, sir, that's some of the issues, yes.
Okay. Well, yeah. The big issue we have is stabilizing the building, I guess, from our commission's point of view. I'm curious about this. Maybe it's already been.
I think there are myriad concerns from the public standpoint. And I say that as public officials. From our standpoint, we are concerned certainly about the Smith Robinson house. We're also concerned that they give the $100,000+ in money they needed towards the water relining project that was going to support their building. They gave us that money. We were concerned about the, over $1 million in taxes that they had not paid. They did pay that. So some of the stuff that we were concerned about, they managed to work on some of the stuff that we're concerned about, like the Smith Robinson house. They didn't. I think for them, it's easier to write a check than it is to actually do the work. And that's been a part of the problem, so.
All right, well, I don't know. I'll just follow up then. So it's something I raised, and then I don't know if it was an issue that didn't need to be looked into further or what, but our point of view is, we're just concerned about preserving the, like, Adam saying that the building stays, the shell stays up. And if the roof is somehow a roadblock for them, because I could imagine it's very expensive and God knows what they have to do. I was just wondering if anyone's ever talked about what might be a less expensive temporary procedure, which is to brace it laterally, because from my experience anyways, it's not just a roof that you have to worry about to keep the walls up. If I said before, if you go to Polypal Island, Bannerman's Island, you'll see a gigantic castle without a roof that's just been there for 100 years and they've braced it laterally. And I'm just wondering, at least from my experience and, seeing that the roof has been open for so long, have they been, gauging whether that thing is buckling the exterior walls and whether maybe it could be just more cost effective to, if they're waiting to build something, to just brace it. And then the shell stays where it is for as long as it takes to, have a permanent installation.
I do not have an answer for you.
Yeah, we can bring it up at the next meeting. We've been trying to schedule a meeting with them.
I would really recommend it because, it'd probably be more cost effective. And from our point of view, at least we keep the shell up. Because you could put a new roof on, the building could still buckle possibly.
Well, we'll raise it with them, but we can keep issuing complaints, which is what we do.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's very difficult.
Okay, thank you for that update. To the extent the public tunes into these meetings, it's important that these updates make it out there into the world, and I'm sure everyone on this call appreciates the update as well.
You muted yourself, Adam.
Yeah, back to the agenda. And briefly, I'd like to wrap this up by 8. The first item is the First Baptist Church. This is, an issue. The deteriorating steeple is a major issue. It's visible. It's one of the first things visitors to Ossining see on 9 going north and south. And that church is an iconic part of our downtown, and it's in terrible shape. And nothing's been done, and no forward progress has happened in the last year since we last spoke about this. And just to remind the group, last we spoke about this, I was in touch with someone at the church and explained that there really is, no organization out there that is just going to pay for these repairs. Most of the programs out there offer matching grants, and to access that funding, you need to have at least a solid idea of the scope of the work and the cost of the work. And I encouraged the person with whom I was in contact to pursue a cost estimate, basically, from a reputable contractor who does historic rehabilitation work. And that lead went dead. I recently followed up with an email to my contact. I don't know if she's still around. I don't know if she's still in Ossining, still a congregant. But if anyone else has any contacts at the First Baptist Church, I think it's worth trying to restart the conversation if possible. I'll also note that the National Trust for Historic Preservation has just launched a Black churches preservation project. It's not accepting applications just yet, and I put my name on an email list to to be given news of when the application becomes available. But that's a brand new funding source. I mean, the sources out there are somewhat limited. This of separation of church and state issues, and there are only a handful of organizations out there who can make money available to churches for restoration. But again, no application is going to get off the ground until the church comes to the table with a plan and a cost estimate and a convincing story to tell about how matching funds are going to be used to realize this project. So that's my update there. Unless anyone has any further comments or questions, I'll move on. Okay. Also, it's not on the agenda, I don't think, but March 12th, that's 5 days from now, is the deadline for high school students to submit either essays or videos to the planning department for our essay and video contest. And I haven't heard from the planning department. I haven't heard from Jamie about whether we've received any submissions so far, but we worked on getting the word out. Joyce Cole certainly was hustling at Bethany. I was following up quite regularly with the folks at the high school. We got the word out to the village itself, which included an advertisement in a web blast and the library. So the advertising has been pretty good. And I'm optimistic that we'll get at least a few entries. And assuming that we do, everyone should review them and be prepared to speak about them at our April meeting.
You're muted, Adam.
Okay, good. That was the only other item on the agenda.
You were muted, Adam.
Am I still muted? No.
You were for a minute.
We lost you after April meeting.
Okay, good. Well, I didn't have anything much to add other than that was the last item on the agenda. And unless anyone has anything else to add, I would make a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I will second your motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Maybe we'll be in person the next time. I should note that. I guess we'll wait to hear from Jaime Martinez at all.
I can tell you now that it is only, I think Stuart left, but I think you're only obligated to meet if you have something to vote on, like a case to vote on. So we'll see if that's the case. I know the EAC does not have to meet in person at all. So I imagine unless you're actually dealing with something that requires a public hearing, you may be able to just meet not in person. But if you're going to have something like an application, you'll have to meet in person. Keep in mind, I am going to be encouraging applicants to not come in person, to continue to use the virtual. We're going to have hybrid meetings, and we're going to try to encourage as many people as possible to sort of not come to the meetings unless absolutely necessary. Obviously, there's some people who like to come in public, but I'd like to, for the most part, make the virtual experience kind of like for the attending public the primary point, because that's the easiest way for us to ensure that the same materials that you're looking at a meeting are available to the general public. And so, if for those of you who've been on this board prior to the pandemic, people show up with boards, and they show you what's on those boards, and they'll face you and not the public. And so the public goes, "Yeah, what's going on with these boards?" And you got to spin around and turn it. What the virtual option has done is it allows us to all be looking at the same information. But if we go to a hybrid model where people again show up with boards and don't use the actual online materials, then there's going to be a disconnect. So that's why at this time, I'm going to be urging people to stay home. So not necessarily for COVID reasons, but because it's kind of a more functional democratic process in that sense, because everybody gets to see the same thing. I am, of course, if the board would prefer them to be fully public and fully in person, that's certainly your discretion. So it's not really my call. It's just kind of how
it's a hard no from me. I don't see any point to meeting in person when we don't need to. I'm dealing with this with the courts right now. You know, it's just so much more efficient. You know, everyone prefers that I know doing things by video conference where possible. So Jaime, I'm on board with your plan to try to encourage remote meetings going forward.
I had a meeting today that took an hour, but it took 30 minutes between getting there in person and getting back in person to get on another, you know, video meeting. So my hour-long meeting took an hour and a half. That's what, and it took, I don't know how much carbon is involved in the gas mileage to get from point A to point B across town. So it's not more efficient to do that. I lost 30 minutes. It is amazing how people may be starting to come around to the idea that virtual is actually better. It's better. It's not an alternative. It's an improvement.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you. And thank you, everybody. I will see you one way or another in April.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night.